Second, after the deaths in Jonestown, lots of media attention was focused on the leader, Jim Jones. It's important to remember that Jim Jones did not order the poison. He did not mix the poison. He did not administer the poison to the people. His followers were the ones who did those tasks. The African-American psychologist Dr. Archie Smith describes a group phenomenon which he calls audience corruption. What he means by audience corruption is the process by which the leader corrupts his or her followers into doing whatever they say, and the followers in turn corrupt the leader with their adulation and their acquiescence. Every time the follower says, "Yes, boss, right away, sir," instead of, "I don't think so," they reinforce the power and the belief in the power of the leader. If everyone says yes and no one says no, a self-perpetuating dynamic emerges. To place all of the blame on a single leader ignores this mutually reinforcing relationship that occurs or can occur in almost any group. Third, as paradoxical as it may seem, we should note that the victims of the violence were also the perpetrators. This is a very hard fact to think about. Group members criticized each other. They were verbally abusive of each other. They were physically abusive to each other. Outsiders were not the ones committing the violent acts against the group. It was those inside the group. And this is part of that corruptive process that I just mentioned. Fourth and finally, we should remember that nobody joined People's Temple expecting to commit murder and suicide. But along the road to Jonestown, members were asked to compromise their ethics and values. They believed that the end justified the means. In that way, they could rationalize lies, punishments, intimidations. They could really rationalize almost anything because they believed their cause was noble and that they were doing the right thing. In other words, well-intentioned and idealistic people became capable of enormous malevolence and criminal behavior. There's so much more that can be said about People's Temple in Jonestown. I encourage you to visit the website, jonestown.sdsu.edu, for more information because there's a wealth of primary source documents, articles and reflections by former members. They're digitized, hundreds of digitized audio tapes. You can listen to sermons and committee meetings and so on. So jonestown.sdsu.edu if you want any more information about that. I would be remiss, however, if I left you thinking that Jonestown and People's Temple were the first and last words about religious communes in California. Although there are other examples of the tragic endings of a religious commune, Heaven's Gate in Rancho San Diego comes to mind, these are really the exceptions. One of the reasons we don't know about the vast majority of other groups is they don't cross the threshold of newsworthiness. We just don't hear about them. But if we look around in our own communities, we can find both historical and current examples of religious communal experiments in the state. In San Diego, we certainly have remnants of the Theosophical Society on Point Loma, and the buildings of Loma Land are incredible. This was a religious commune that was established towards the end of the 19th century and existed until about the 1930s, had a profound impact on culture in San Diego. Some of the buildings are still in use by a university that's located there. Several groups arose in and around Sonoma County. Fountain Grove and Altruria were religious communes that were established just outside of Santa Rosa in the 19th century. These were rather short-lived communes, but nonetheless very interesting for their beliefs and their practices. Tuolumne Cooperative Farms was located outside of Southwest Modesto, and that was established by Quaker families just after World War II. It existed for a couple of decades and into the 60s, and the families were trying to live out their religious ideals by living communally and owning their property cooperatively. Similarly, the Church of the Golden Rule ran a cooperative motel and a restaurant in Willits, California, for several decades. Its members lived in a community that was trying to live out Jesus' golden rule. So if we stopped and looked around, we would see all sorts of small religious communes, monasteries, ashrams. These communities are still thriving today. They're out there. We just have to look for them. While People's Temple gave us the phrase drinking the Kool-Aid, we need to remember that the vast majority of religious communal groups have enriched our state in ways that far exceed that single phrase. They've contributed to the creation of significant alternatives to the status quo, both religiously and culturally. And for that reason, they're very much worth looking at. Thank you very much.